So designer who am I? My name is Carlos Perez. I am the director of design at BidHound. I am a designer. But I also like to build a lot with the web, and I made my first website in 1995, and I used tables to do the layout, and I used a phone line to transmit the data. So dating myself a little bit, but yeah, I've been at this for a while. So I design, I code, I use Vim, and I love working with developers. I don't just like working with developers. I know sometimes that's an odd sentiment from designers. I wish it wasn't, but sometimes it is. You can follow myself or BidHound, who I work with, at Carlos Perez or at BidHound.io on Twitter. Yeah, BidHound is sponsoring this, which is awesome. I'm happy to be here. This is my first time. I guess it'll be my last time, unfortunately, but really excited to be here. So what am I talking about? When my boss, Dan, came to me, he said, we want you to do the talk at JSConf for us this year. And I said, okay, that's a little, it's intimidating, it's a bit awkward, because what do I have to contribute to a room of developers? And I kind of figured, you know what, actually I have a lot to contribute. We work together a lot. We can work together even better a lot of the times. So I really did see this as an opportunity. It took me exactly 1 week to get to that point. But I figured, yeah, let's go for it. So what I'm going to run through is kind of a little bit, I'm going to share a bit of the process that we have at BidHound and how we mesh design and development together. I wouldn't say it's necessarily unique, but it feels good. So I'm kind of excited to be able to share that anytime I have the opportunity to. So I'm going to talk about where design goes. Kind of seems like a silly question, but it's one I think a lot of people struggle with. What's our process? How do we accomplish these things? What tools we use to improve collaboration? Is there too much of a good thing sometimes? And I'll share some downfalls. Why JavaScript is the best to help bridge design and development, and why this all matters. So just to preface this isn't the Agile Manifesto. This is just my opinion. And we pride ourselves in changing our process a lot. You know, we might have a few sprint plannings where we're just like, you know what, this isn't working anymore. And we change things up. So this is kind of like the culmination of what we've experienced over the past couple of years. Some of my experiences working at other organizations. So again, just my opinion. So to answer that first question, where does design go? It's a tough question. Product managers, designers, developers, we all struggle with it. Where does it go? A lot of dev shops now use Agile, of course, and it's usually a developer-introduced process, and it usually winds up living in development. So as an outsider, as the designer coming in, it's kind of hard to find that sweet spot of like, so where do I fit in on this? So I'm going to hopefully answer that a little bit better. We know it shouldn't go at the end. I think we've been beaten over the head with that enough, where if you're leading design to be that little bit of lipstick at the end, a little bit of polish that you want to pretty things up, it doesn't really work. So I'm not going to dwell on that too much. So that kind of leaves, hey, the beginning, right? And it feels good. I'm going to start off with design. We're doing it right. We're thinking about the problem first. We're going to do the mock-ups, and then we're going to hand it off, and we're going to build it. But this is actually kind of where I see the process fall apart a lot. Because the expectation generally is designer and the product manager go off, look at the research, do interviews with users, do some wireframes, make up some mock-ups. Then that gets handed off to developers, create some stories, get those assigned, and it gets built. And it's usually about this time when the designer stops on that feature and works on the next one. Something that I had struggled with a lot was the idea of having to keep one sprint ahead of the developers. And that was really, really challenging, A, because it expected that work could be done, you know, in a sprint right ahead. But then it didn't really give that opportunity to continue working on that initial feature. So, yeah, so what's the problem with that? Well, I kind of just explained that, sorry. But I think that what generally happens with this is the designer's original intent might not carry through to the end product. And that's not the developer's fault at all. Everything is done with a series of best guesses, right? Designers will do mock-ups based on the information they have at the time. They give it to the developers. The developers have different information. They have technical reasons why something can or can't happen. They run into other roadblocks. There's other bugs. There's other priorities that come up. So to make the assumption that we can figure out the design at the beginning and then it gets just, the perfect product comes out at the end, well, it's a challenging one. So, all right, where does it go? Might not like where this is leading, but it's kind of everywhere. And that's easy for me to say. I'm the designer standing up here saying design should be everywhere. Well, development should be everywhere too. I think it's really a product building process. It's not a dev process. It's not a design process. So at BitHound, we really try to make this about the product. Development starts at the beginning. Design starts at the beginning. And we work our way through it. So let me explain how we actually go about doing this. So how do we put design everywhere? For starters, we assign our features to a designer and developer pair. Gord, our CTO, just pointed out to me, it's like, yeah, we actually have 2 designers and 1 developer. We're not counting you. Of course, we have another one. So, but that's actually kind of an interesting thing, and we're building a tool that looks at your code. It's kind of neat, though. So we assign the feature, and the expectation is we don't really go dive deep into what that feature is supposed to do at the time. We let the pair figure that out. And what that kind of means is, just from the get-go, there aren't necessarily too many assumptions about what it will look like. We start by looking at the data. So a lot of our features will actually start with a route that outputs JSON. Or, not even, maybe it's just something we throw in Slack, and that's where we start discussing it. And what this does is gets rid of that paradigm of the designer using perfect data to do these perfect mock-ups. And everything looks beautiful, but once you start plugging in real data, you realize that falls apart really quickly. So we start with the data so that anything that we do from a design perspective is already looking at real-world circumstances. And that really helps out a lot. We don't define a handoff stage where, once design's done, developers take over. Of course it happens, but it's never the same for any given feature. So, and like I said, the handoff might actually happen multiple times. Design to dev, dev back to design, and it's an iterative process. Another little trick up our sleeves is we like designers who code. So we code enough to be dangerous. So you can really probably call us front-end developers. That's probably what we would be called in a lot of organizations, but we definitely lean towards the aesthetic, the experience side. So we're that first, front-end second. But given how closely we work with our developers, that's a very nice compliment. What this also helps with, which you might appreciate, is those pixel-perfect, mind-numbing alterations that the designer wants to do. Well, we do that ourselves. So hopefully that leaves the more interesting and more complicated dev work available, so you're not getting annoyed by us all the time. So developers help with design problems. That's how we do it. Designers help with dev problems. And we do a lot of pair programming, but it's often with the designer and the developer, which is really neat. And we both learn so much from that process. So let's talk tools. And I don't mean the designers. I mean like apps and stuff. The ones that we use to help us do this process better. So to start, I want to say break down the barriers of these are design tools and these are developer tools, because that already just silos the process. Like, well, I'm not supposed to use that, so I'm not going to bother learning about it. So we try to find as many ways to level that playing field. We use pull requests, kind of like how GitHub, I don't know if they still do, but this is what they used to do. There's a presentation called How GitHub Uses GitHub to Build GitHub. And we kind of modeled our process around that. And that is, you open a pull request the moment you start on a feature, versus it's just the thing that you do at the end to review the code. And what that lets us do is embed discussion into the pull request. And you have this thread of comments. We put mock-ups in there. We put all sorts of things. We use it to review code, of course. And it gives us kind of a historical backlog of how a feature got developed. And we tend to work very closely in the office together, but whenever travel does happen, this is a perfect way for us to stay on top of things. But the fact that design is in those pull requests from the beginning also means that towards the end of the review process, design is also involved. And they know everybody is on the same page about what's going on. Your issue tracker. I included this because I went to a design meetup months ago, and I asked 2 designers about what issue tracker they used at their companies. And they kind of just grumbled and said, oh, I don't know, the developers use Pivotal, we don't usually touch that. Which I kind of found interesting. I was like, why not? That's a perfect way for you guys to collaborate with development, put new ideas down, initiate discussion. So I actually see the issue tracker as just as much as a design tool as a development tool. And it's great for that conversation. So for designers who are just dangerous enough with code, Git is a very daunting roadblock. It involves the command line. So already, you've kind of lost most designers. And so once you want to play around with code, but then Git kind of gets in the way. So you must have, I'm sure there's an onboarding process to share your best practices with new hires when it comes to your Git process. And I encourage you to include designers in that as well. There's a GUI app called Tower for the Mac that is brilliant for this. That's how I got to understand Git. I now use it on the command line, but I still use Tower for certain things because it just does it better. Or at least I feel it does better. So get them comfortable in Git. Your local dev environment should be friendly. And this is obviously could be said for both designers and developers. The moment, again, any barrier that might prevent somebody from fiddling around with code, from prototyping something, is just an excuse to say, you know what, hey, not really my job, I guess. I'm going to stick to doing some mock-ups in Sketch or Photoshop. So at BitHound, I love our local dev environment. It takes those commands to get running. Gord did a talk about how we get from 0 to pull request and by noon or by lunch, something like that. And it's totally doable. So the easier it is to get up and running, the less of a barrier, of course, it is to start fiddling with some code. This kind of seems like a simple idea. Use old school tools, but it's actually quite powerful when you think about use a chalkboard or use a whiteboard or paper or whatever. And there's no pretenses behind, well, that's a design tool or that's a developer tool. No, it's just it's a thing, it's a tool. And we use them extensively. We use them for our sprint planning. We do our to-do lists on there. We do our mock-ups on there. And it's very common to see we'll have a design element mocked up, and right next to it, the data structure of the data that's going to populate those elements. So that discussion happens from the get-go. JavaScript is the best. I don't have to tell you this. You're here for a reason. But I'll give you the designer's perspective of why JavaScript is awesome for this. This includes jQuery, and I know I've heard it firsthand where it's like, we want developers who do JavaScript and not jQuery. And it's like, well, hold on a minute. jQuery is, I think, the best framework that bridges what's happening in the browser to code. And it's something as designers, it's really easy to understand. And I've tried PHP. I looked at Objective-C a million times, and I gave up on that. Those never took. jQuery, it was very easy to grasp, very easy to start prototyping in it, which brings me to prototyping. I mean, it's great. Again, you know this. Designers might not. Open up the DOM inspector. I mean, I don't know how many times I've done this with a designer and said, look, even if you just wanted to change text, you can do it like this, and their eyes just light up. And never mind the things you can actually do with actual animation and all that kind of stuff. So JavaScript it's perfect for prototyping. A lot of our features start as hacky prototypes like this. And they get cleaned up, but that's eventually what gets shipped. And it's even better when you're using Node. So from my personal experience, I knew a little bit of jQuery. I got better at just vanilla JavaScript. And then I started to understand the back end a lot better. It's one language, I got it. And again, that's just a powerful thing to arm somebody with when usually it's just a very daunting task. So can you have too much of a good thing? Is there too much crossover that happens between design and development? And there is. Absolutely there is. Something that the designers at Bithound often struggle with is getting caught up in the challenge of trying to figure something out. So after about the 6th hour trying to scour Stack Overflow for an answer, I ask a developer and I get it solved in 5 minutes. So it's something we just have to kind of keep on top of and say, this is great. We're all about the pursuit of knowledge and learning about this. But at the end of the day, we got to ship something. So it's just something to be cognizant of. We also find developers doing too much design. And actually, we don't. I didn't have a screenshot of the table thing that you did the other day, but and this isn't a slight. Honestly, what is awesome, and I never get tired of, is when we're talking about features, when we're talking about planning, and the developers are saying, "Hold on a minute, we can't do it like this. That would be a bad experience. That wouldn't look right. It wouldn't fit well with the product." And that happens a lot, which is really, really awesome. The biggest concern is, when is a feature done? So you're working with design and development, very much entrenched, and you start getting those problems, and you need to solve them, and that can spiral sometimes out of control. But at the same time, it's kind of a good thing. So, I mean, we call this scope creep, right? But the scope is rarely right. So when's a better time to do it? Well, right in the middle of it, when you're building the product. So it is good, but of course, at the end of the day, you need to ship something. So we still struggle with it, and we just need to plan a bit better ahead to know, you know what, this looks like one of those features that it's going to grow. We'll often ship things into production behind a feature flag. We'll play around with it for a while before we expose it to the rest of our users. And sometimes this happens, and maybe on more than one occasion, but I don't really want to dwell on that. Yeah, I've ruined a good couple of mornings by force pushing to master. I really like the new protected branch feature on GitHub. And I do have some pre-push or commit tools on the command line to prevent that. But that's good. I hopefully we'll never make that mistake again. So what? Why does this matter? Why should you try to get designers and developers working together? And honestly, think it makes for more thoughtful products. You start thinking. Everybody starts thinking about the experience, about the user. You're all working towards the same goal. And it translates to your users. Kind of like I mentioned before, there's a constant level of polish going on because both designers and developers are all of a sudden comfortable to fix those little nitpicky things that are in production that never quite get assigned in a sprint because they're never top of mind, right? Everybody's armed with the right tool set to make the changes themselves, so we'll often just fix it rather than open up an issue because usually it's just a couple more minutes of time. So designers think more about code, structure, and implementation, which I strongly believe makes you a better designer. It reinforces the process aspect of it. And developers think more about design experience. And of course, you guys already do. I get it. We always try to understand the process, the development process as well. I think this just makes it a little bit stronger. But what this really all kind of boils down to is that it's all about empathy. Once you start to understand your coworkers' challenges, once they start to understand yours, you can actually help each other. And this speaks volumes to what the product starts to feel like and what the users wind up seeing with this. So it's empathy between your coworkers, it's empathy with your users, which is really powerful. And the onus isn't on developers. This isn't, hey, how come you're not letting designers in? That's not the problem. Designers have to be just as willing to participate. I've seen plenty of designers who don't want to participate. So I think it obviously takes both sides to get that process figured out. And that's it. Keep in touch. Again, my Twitter handle, BitHound. I'd really urge you guys to go check that out. I'd love to hear some feedback on it. And yeah, thank you very much. If you have any questions, come see me afterwards. All right, thank you.